how different towns and different people bring you together, and the horses, the kind of horses bring you together too. So that's been pretty interesting. So yeah.
Well, that was, I mean, when you said Camden, my first thought was steeplechasing. That's what I thought of. So
yes, it is. It's the steeplechase capital of the world, which is odd because when I went to vet school, I was at Liverpool University, and they have the big Grand National there every year, the Grand National Steeplechase, which I had kind of learned about that on a movie. There was an old PBS movie called Champions with John Hurt in it. And it was actually a true story about a steeplechase jockey and a particular horse that kind of beat the odds and come back. But the interesting thing was that was one of my favorite horse movies growing up. And if you've never seen it, you need to watch it because the cinematography is amazing and the story is great. But that particular jump jockey that the movie was about had ties here in Camden, South Carolina as well. So there's a lot of local people that knew Bob Champion when he was racing and he was going through his ordeal. So it was again, one of those things that you kind of grow up watching, and then you end up in the town where a lot of these things happened, or links to these great stories kind of took place. So it was really cool. So I actually came back here to work after leaving the UK, and have been here ever since. So that was back in 2003. So we've been back here ever since. So
okay,
yeah. So
good deal.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And so then how do you and Ben know each other?
Well, okay. So all of us were at a clinic a few years ago at Pendleton in
okay.
Yeah. So we didn't know each other at the time, but a couple of the girls that I ride with, some of my riding friends and our sort of co-sharers of horsemanship, we try to attend a buck clinic every time he comes to this, every time he comes to the East Coast. And the last time he was in Pendleton, which was not last year, but the year before, I think, 2020.
It would have been 2022. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you guys were there. We were there. And you guys had just started your podcast. And my good friend Meredith was she's great. She always knows everything about everybody. So she had kind of told us about this podcast, and we started following because we followed Buck, and we've had interest in what Dr. Barnes is doing with his horsemanship aspect, and so we started following your podcast, and then I had this young horse that my other friend Sarah and I, Sarah is she's a local horsemanship instructor, and we all sort of follow the principles of buck and horsemanship, and she's been a dear friend of mine for many years, and so we're very good friends. We're raising our kids together. We ride together. We hunt together, all that. And we were talking about this young horse. So she had suggested talking to Ben or talking to one of you guys about bringing this young horse along. And so then I got in touch with Ben. But we've been following you guys on the podcast. So you've got 3 listeners here in Camden. So...
Awesome.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
So I do a few more because we all sort of share the experiences with the podcast to all of our clients and stuff. So we're trying to get you guys out there.
So Nicole, have you ever done a podcast before?
I have not. No.
Really? So this is your first time?
First time. Yes.
First time.
Yes.
Well, you're a natural. You're doing great so far.
Well,
how's your horse doing, by the way?
He's awesome. He's really, really good. We had a fun session today. We played around a little bit. I think Joe and I were just talking about going. Sometimes around the holidays, things kind of get kicked by the wayside, and I have, you get busy and have presents to wrap and food to cook and parties to go to and all this. So really it had been a good week since I'd been on him. But that's probably the longest it's been since I've had him back. And he was great. It was really fun today. We had a good time. So we're, just working on little things, and I'm trying to make the sessions, sometimes we don't have a whole lot of time together, but, just trying to make them, meaningful rather than just, get on and putter around in circles. So we'll do something and, time up for a little bit and go putter around and do something and then come back and reiterate. But yeah, I'm having a really nice time with him. It was a really good move to send him to you. It's been really good. I've enjoyed him. So yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. I'm glad things are going well for you.
I think he misses the ranch life a little bit.
Yeah.
But
it's a pretty good life.
A little bit boring for him here, but no, but he's good. Yeah. He's really good. So
no, he did great. It's a good life, huh? I mean, gosh, if you were a horse, it could be really good or it could be really bad, depending on who owned you, because you don't own a car. So
right.
You're just kind of at the mercy of your owner.
Right.
So anyway, we've had a few different veterinarians on the podcast in the past. It's been super interesting. And I think the common theme that I've picked up on, at least, is that like the career path that you guys choose and what you do for a living, it's not on accident. Like it's maybe a little bit like what Joe and I do. You don't just accidentally ride horses for the public, just like you don't accidentally become an astronaut. There's some real thought and some background that go into becoming a veterinarian. So would you tell us a little bit about like your early on life? Like what set you up to want to work with animals? I was thinking about this the other day before you answer. Like we have a veterinarian we work with, and he is got to be in his mid 70s, maybe a little older. He doesn't listen to this, so I don't mind just guessing around to his age. Basically, he's beyond the podcast listening age. But anyway, we had a cow go down the day before Christmas, and he was out here within 30 minutes, wrestled that thing down. He bent that cow's head and tied her nose to her hind foot better than all the interns here, and probably myself included.
Wow.
We're all Mr. Cowboy, and old Dr. Davis shows up and just ties the cow down by himself. And but I was thinking about him because I was like, gosh, we all think we like animals. There's a guy that loves animals. He's got his two little dogs that ride with him, and I don't think I realize it as much. He's just kind of an old grumpy guy. But then when you're out there and it's a nasty kind of afternoon and you'd like to go get ready for the holidays and you have other things to do. Right. And here's this guy that, we're paying him, but still, I mean, it's not like we're paying him enough to come out there happily unless he really wanted to do it himself. And so what would you say it's something with your upbringing that caused you to desire the veterinary life?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a recessive gene somewhere, but for as long as I can remember, always loved horses. Horses was everything. And my mother gave me a copy of James Harriet's book, All Creatures Great and Small, when I was in the 5th grade, and I read it. And you guys know James Harriet? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, good. Because I feel like the younger veterinary generation doesn't know James Harriet. And it kind of, it was kind of always a joke among the older veterinarians that James Harriet was required reading to get into vet school. So, if you could get through the first page of James Harriet, then, you were bound. But that was kind of the thing that started it. And so I just kind of followed that path. Had, a few digressions, academically and, thinking and couldn't get past physics or math or whatever. And, I'll just do a different major, but always came back to it and kind of slugged it out and got through physics and math and applied to vet school and got in. So, it was a little perseverance, but, never really wanted to do anything else, truly. So yeah. And always horses, never anything else. So that's how it worked out. And, going through vet school, you had to learn all the aspects of all the animals. But I was lucky enough to land an equine job coming straight out of school. So I've been in practice for 23 years. So yeah.
Good deal. Pretty good run.
And did your career start in the UK, or did you start practicing over here?
No, it did. I ended up staying over there. I practiced over there for 3.5 years before we moved back here. So yeah. So, okay. And I had originally planned to come back after the first year of vet school. You had the option to transfer back into a U.S. school. But I felt like, we'd just gotten used to everything over there after the first year. So I ended up staying for 3 years after I graduated. So yeah.
Hey, On the Move listener. Have you been following us on social media? Have you been watching the video format of the podcasts? If so, you've probably noticed by now that we have On the Move merch. I'm wearing one of our hats right now. The first order of hats we did flew off the shelves, and we've only got a handful left in each style. But we're doing another order, and if you want to pre-order your On the Move hat today, go to www.onthemovepodcast.com. There you'll find our Shopify store with hats, mugs, stickers, and other merch. Get it just in time for the holiday season and let everyone know that you're on the move.
And so yeah, and then came back here to Camden, and again that was just the stars aligned perfectly, and found this equine job, very lucrative job here in the UK or here in Camden, and it was great. It was really good. So yeah, and I guess a little bit this has kind of come about. I have recently left general practice, so yeah, I wouldn't have traded anything that I've done so far for the experience has been great. I just feel like it's just a different time to move on to something different, with the career path. But yeah, so it's been really good. So.
What was the I'd be curious to know what you felt like the differences were being an equine vet in the UK versus South Carolina.
Going to vet school over there was a little different as far as the so I did my undergraduate here in the States at University of Georgia, and had the opportunity to go to school in the UK, and University of Georgia was my first pick for vet school, obviously because I did my undergraduate there, but just didn't quite have the grade point average to get in, and they had offered me a place doing a master's, and they said, do your master's and then we'll let you into vet school. So opportunities arose, and so I ended up going to the UK. But looking back, it was a great experience to kind of experience a different culture, even though it was in an English speaking country. It was still a little just still different. Industry was a little bit different, and but for the most part, medicine's medicine, surgery, and I think there were a lot of parallels, and so I don't feel like I was at any real advantage or disadvantage practicing in either country. But definitely fun to just experience, different culture and living there for as long as we did. So it was really fun. So yeah. So, and lucky enough to end up at Liverpool. I didn't have a choice of schools, but lucky enough to end up at Liverpool, which was one of the, had a great reputation for, all things equine there. So yeah, it was great experience. So.
What does that look like there as far as equine ownership? You know how it is here. Everybody, horses are expensive, but everybody can sort of have a horse. Over there, is that common, or how does that work?
I almost feel like it's a little bit more common.
Really?
Yeah. There were, so in some of the places, some of the sort of more built up areas or less rural areas, people would still have a horse in their little back garden and a little stable, or even if they had an acre or two of land, they would have a horse. So I kind of feel like per maybe space wise that there were a lot more horses there, than there are here. It's a little bit spread out, and it just seemed like you're just sort of average person living in a housing development could have a horse in their backyard if they wanted to, whereas here you wouldn't do that because a lot of there's HOAs and things like that in some of these subdivisions these days. So yeah, but I kind of feel like probably more common for your average person to own a horse than it is here. It's a little bit more exclusive, isn't it? You either come up with a farm out upbringing, or if you live in town, you take riding lessons on a farm somewhere else, right? So.
Mm-hmm. And are these people using these horses, or just sort of a pet everybody has?
Usually more pets, yeah. So yeah. So
kind of completes the look, I guess, if you have a little house in the countryside.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'm less familiar with James Harriet writing, but where's that set?
Yorkshire in UK. Yeah. So he was a country vet. He was from Scotland, and he went to vet school. I think it was World War One, or maybe prior to World War One. So he was practicing in a rural practice in the North Yorkshire Dales when he first came out. And so his writings are of all of his experiences. And so, he's kind of a UK icon, as far as, farming life and rural life and veterinary medicine and all that goes. So, but he practiced, in his first job was in a little town in North Yorkshire. And so he wrote of his tales. So he's got a whole series of books and everything. So
yeah,
there's also a television series that the BBC had originally done. And then PBS has just recently done a remake of all of his stories. So yeah. So, yeah.
And to be honest, that's how I knew about him. It wasn't through the books first. It was from the BBC show,
right.
Which I think PBS would like re-air when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And so I remember watching the original TV show, All Creatures Great and Small, when I was a little kid.
When you were a little kid,
and then eventually, reading a few of the books, I think, when I got kind of to that reading level or whatever, as things went on.
Yeah.
That's what I'm mostly familiar with. I've seen a few shots of that, and listening to you talk about your time in the UK was conjuring images of that small town, veterinary lifestyle and the horse in the backyard and stuff. And I know what it's like to be pursuing like an ideal career / lifestyle, and then have a bit of an inner dialogue, or have an example that you also look at and compare it to your journey as you go along. How would you say, like, the writings or even the show itself held up to your experience, like
That's
your
so
actual
funny.
career? Like what are some of the things that did not parallel your real life experience?
I don't think that any of it didn't. Oddly enough, that you asked that question. There have been several times over the years where you ask yourself, why did I choose this career? Something in the middle of the night, or you have to crawl out of bed to go see something when it's freezing cold, or you're inevitably on call when a hurricane blows through or something. You're driving to something, and you're like, why am I doing this? But then you get there, and for some reason, kind of like your old vet the other day, you get out of the car and you've got a smile on your face, and you get your job done, and just end up getting back in the car and going, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, So there were, a lot of parallels, especially over there in the UK. The countryside's beautiful. I ended up, my first job over there was in a beautiful market town, very similar to, the Dales. I was more in the western part of the country, but in Shropshire is where I worked. But it was, every day was beautiful. It was scenic and gorgeous. And but even here in Camden, some days you'd have a long drive, or you take the back roads because there wouldn't be as much traffic, and you can kind of just decompress a little bit as you're driving along and going to your next visit. So yeah, just sort of a lot of those things that you just try to embrace while you're in your working life. And but the good thing is that every day was different. No day was the same, and there's always some sort of adventure around the corner, or some great case that you managed to solve, or something that didn't go so well, but you did the best you can. But yeah, a lot of parallels, lots of ups and downs. Interestingly enough, the one of the characters that the series is based on was James Harriet's original boss, who had he owned the practice, and of course when he had hired James Harriet, it was kind of a family thing, and they all practiced together and went through all their trials and tribulations together. So yeah, it did kind of symbol a lot of the camaraderie of just getting through day-to-day work. So yeah. So yeah.
Do you write at all? Just odd topic. Listening to you talk, I'm like, man, you might be an author yourself.
No, I used to. I used to write. Oddly enough, I wrote for the school newspapers, both the high school and college newspapers, and had a small scholarship, journalism scholarship, to one of the schools I went to. But and I used to write, but not so much anymore. But I might get back into it. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's interesting. I think that I heard it said recently that podcasting, because I think podcasting, and it may not be good for our personal development, but I think that's starting to take the place of like the layman who writes and develops his memoirs over the years. Now you can just have a podcast. People can get it firsthand. But in a way, like your podcast, it's not really it's not a project all of its own. It's like, well, it can be, but for people like us, it's a avenue to express your deep love and appreciation for like your career, but also your art. So absolutely. I feel like for like Joe and I, maybe if we didn't have a podcast, we'd be trying to write or do something else, but you're so vested in this thing that you need that decompression time and time to talk with friends or mentors or interesting people and sort things out. And because that's really cool. Writing might be better for you from a mental standpoint. Probably would be better for me, but podcasting's funner. But people like James Harriet, or like even yourself, if you got into it, or it sounds like you dabbled, you're riding around, you're doing all these things, and you get a unique perspective of the world. So it makes sense that you would write, these things down and kind of regurgitate them and enjoy them. And
Yeah.
Just kind of like take your already interesting life and then like dig through it a little bit more and pull out nuggets. And
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about listening to y'all's podcast is that I feel like I've learned about so many different people and crafts and, from saddle making to photography. I loved your interview with Nicole Pollo a few weeks ago and, just her perspective. But yeah, I don't know that if, maybe if she wrote a book about it, that I would pick up her book on photography and read it because it's not a general interest, but because she's on on this podcast that we sort of listen in on a regular basis. But I feel like there's been something to take away almost from every episode that you guys have done, both, even when it's just you guys yourselves, you always end up finding something very interesting to touch base with, and there's always a takeaway from it, and it's been really, really fun to listen to, and also share it with, like, I'll share it with my clients when I'm working on their horses, or a topic will come up and I'll be like, oh, I heard something about this on the podcast, and then it comes into the conversation, but yeah, same thing. You read a book or an article, and you might mention it in passing, but just another different platform to take it away, right? So yeah, it's been good. So
certainly,
yeah. But one of the things, I was listening to Nicole's your podcast with Nicole a few weeks ago, and just to listen to her talk about how she gets some of her shots and how she incorporates her horsemanship into that. And that, for some reason, I just really hadn't thought about it. And, in that perspective, in order for her to get a specific shot, she has to understand a maneuver in such a way that she has to be ready for that maneuver to happen before it happens. And then it made me go back and look at some of her work and then think about what that horse was doing at the time she took it. It was just really fascinating to listen to it. And, I have no interest in photography or pursuing a craft like that, but I, enjoy looking at it, and I love her work and everybody else's work that's out there. I mean, but just to hear about specifics that go into something, be it photography or who's the gentleman you had on, the border collie trainer,
Jack.
Jack. And then but everybody, it all comes back to everybody's love of animals, doesn't it? And that's why everybody's here. So I don't know, it's just really cool how it's very eclectic group of people sharing one particular love, but having so many different crafts, but still, bringing all together. So I think that's just a really neat perspective. So listen to everybody's contribution. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's been really interesting for me, kind of the ethos of this is on the move people who are actively pursuing something, or they're good at their craft or whatever that is. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. The overlying theme is love. They have genuine passion and a lot of times compassion for, whatever they're doing, helping others. And it's what motivates them. I think it's hard to be on the move, so to speak, if you don't have some sort of love driving you, and it takes a lot of other things too, like discipline and grit and, a lot of other things we talk about, but that has to be kind of the underlying thing for all of it. Because otherwise you won't build all those other layers on top of it that you need to get to where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And these are the layers, like, I feel like your podcast help us, put these layers together to get again, I'll hear something that you guys talk about, and I'll take it to my daily practice at work, or take it to the barn with me, or and just kind of really think about those things in different perspectives. So it's been really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, in a way, it's like we're creating a mastermind group of just shared interests, inadvertently, and having a good time. So, speaking of on the move, so why did you move back to the States from the UK? Like, I know you kind of brushed on it, but was that tough to leave, or did you have to leave?
No, it was just a choice we made. It was a little bit of a financial decision. And then it was family related too. I still had a lot of family here, both my parents and all my grandparents, and my sister had a young son, and I just kind of felt like it was time to come back and be part of their lives. So that's why I made the move back. I met my husband over there in the UK. We were at vet school together, and so we just kind of made the decision to come back here and start a life back here. And so we did that again. We did that in 2003, and came back here to Camden as a stepping stone. We just never left. So, so it was supposed to be kind of a 1-year thing, and then we were going to look for jobs elsewhere. But we both, the first few months were a little rough, just kind of getting back into the lifestyle and work and everything. And then I guess about 8 or 9 months into it, my husband looked at me and he was like, I don't think I want to go back anymore. And I was like, you wanted to go back? He's like, yeah, a couple of months ago I did. And I said, well, if you had said that a couple of months ago, I probably would have packed my stuff and we'd gone back. But we both, I guess for some reason, independently persevered and ended up staying. And so Camden's such a great place for people. I feel like the people here, talking about just love of horses, the people here truly love horses. It's a lifestyle for them as well. My husband's a small animal vet, so he found, his niche working here. And, with horses comes small animals too, dogs and cats. And so both of us have made a very nice living here, and very grateful for all the friendships and everything that we've established here. And just kind of never really I just want to leave yet. So yeah. So then you put down roots and you buy property, and then you have kids and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where we are right now in that sort of melee right now. So yeah.
And did you guys meet in vet school then?
We did, yeah. Well, we didn't actually meet in vet school. We met in a pub at vet school.
Hey guys, let's talk about steel buildings for a minute. Maybe you've looked into building one on your place. Maybe you saw the price tag and that scared you off. Maybe just the sheer amount of work and effort, planning, all that good stuff that goes into it has kept you from going ahead and building on your property. Well, now's a great time to get a free quote from a great company. Head over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move. And our friends at Metal Material Direct have a free online configurator. You can plug in all your details, dimensions, specifications, colors, windows, dormers, all kind of cool stuff. And you can see the building and get a free quote. If you head over there now and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you, you can get a massive discount on your building. And we're talking American steel. This is top quality stuff, guys, and a great company. They also offer fencing, a really cool fencing solution. It's octagon pipe with bolt together connectors. So don't miss out on this. If you have wanted to need a building, or building fence, building an arena, just anything ranch, farm, or commercial related, head on over to www.metalmdi.com metalmdi.com/on-the-move and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you.
So he was, we actually met my first week there, oddly enough. And some international fellow American students had advised us to make friends with somebody who had a car. And they had made friends with my husband, Damien, and they said, that guy over there has a car. And so because we moved over there, you don't have a vehicle and everybody gets around using public transportation. And, Americans just aren't used to that. So friends with cars were, you kind of had to be very nice to them. And if somebody had a car, then you had a ride to the grocery store and you didn't have to bring all your groceries back on the bus or on a bike or something like that. So it avoided the public transportation in the UK. But and he was just in a social group of friends that I'd hooked up with, and so we started dating the first year of school, and we've been together ever since. So
Wow.
So
So that's like a universal truth right there. It's just having a car will help you get the girl every time.
Right? Yeah. So and over there, it didn't even have to be a nice car; it just had to be a car, right?
Hey, availability is the best ability,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
But no, it's been a great experience. So and then again, coming back here to Camden, again, just a place where people truly loved horses, and people have made their lifestyles and their fortunes, and made a lot of personal goals with their horses here. And so again, just a great community to be in, where twice a year we all come together to celebrate the horse, and with racing and fox hunting and horse showing and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of everything here, and your backyard horse, and it was a good place to come and make a living with horses.
And what you mentioned, you had like a lucrative opportunity. What prior to this recent career change, what was your job?
I was just a general practitioner in an equine practice, but it was a pretty big practice with a very good reputation. The gentleman who started it, I guess back in the early 90s, as an official practice. He had been coming down for several years following the racing, and I guess decided to put down roots and establish a practice here. And when I joined them, they were a 3-doctor practice, and when I left, we were a 6.5-doctor practice. They had just the gentleman who owned it, he had just sold out to a corporate company, and but it was just really, really lucrative in the work, in that it was racing and A-level hunters, again, all sorts of athletes, and again, right down to the backyard pony lesson ponies, things like that. So, but very exclusive, because it was just equine only. So, and we got a very good reputation and covered a really large area. So as the industry, as veterinary practice is changing, a lot of the general practice was coming to us. And then we have a few referral centers around. So there's 3 hospitals sort of within a 2-hour drive, and then some other university hospitals a bit further away. So we've always had the support of that. Never a hospital here in Camden, but we were just kind of general practitioners here in Camden. So
okay. Yeah. I could see where that would be kind of a dream setup if
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to be an equine veterinarian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm like 10 minutes down the road here from the Virginia Tech Vet School.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so just kind of grew up in it and around it a little bit, pretty much. And that was kind of the long running thing. I guess you'd say stereotype was kind of some young female who wanted to come in and say, I want to be an equine vet. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, that's great, but that's kind of a dime a dozen. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to make money? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, well, you need to go to poultry or swine or something that
Mm-hmm.
makes money, right? Or, you need to be prepared to go somewhere in the middle of nowhere, being all around, and maybe every fifth day you get to see a horse,
Yeah,
right?
see a horse, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And
Or yeah, you're part of the practice, but all the senior practitioners get to see the horses, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And that's not, I don't think maybe a vet student would feel different, but I don't think they necessarily try to crush dreams over there.
No.
But they say that stuff because that can be a reality
It
for a
can be
lot of aspiring
absolutely.
veterinarians, because you don't get to just be in a place with a giant, horse culture, and that there's a bunch of horses to work on, and it's an equine only practice with multiple veterinarians. And then you have these university hospitals available within a reasonable drive. And like, that sounds like a pretty ideal setup if someone was going to draw it up.
Yeah. 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 It was, very, very ideal and very, very good for the years that I did it. So, but and again, starting out 20 years ago, or 23 years ago, I remember there were in the UK, there were 5 equine jobs available when I graduated from school. And there were 9 of us in my class alone that wanted to do all equine work. So all of my classmates were applying we were all applying for the same jobs. So to put it in perspective, I was just reading an article earlier this afternoon. Last year, 1% of graduates were going into equine practice from the U.S. 1% of graduates going into equine practice. And I remember as our practice here in Camden was growing, and we were starting to feel the need to hire an additional veterinarian. We would have 20 resumes that would come in, and we'd thumb through those and pick out 10. And from those 10, we'd call those kids in and interview, 5 of them, and, have to choose one. And the last position before I left the practice, the last position that we advertised for, desperate for, it, was one of 3 applicants. So that's how slim it's getting out there. The things have got to change in order to bring these young kids back and get them to want to do equine practice. I was pretty lucky to land the jobs that I landed, because that's all I ever wanted to do was be an equine veterinarian. So I feel like the path was good for me. I think it would be good for anybody who wanted to do it now. It's just there's nobody wants to do it anymore. Because it's a lifestyle. It's what you sign up for. The sort of James Harriet stories, or the stories that you told about your vet coming out Christmas Eve to wrestle the cow, right? So those are the things you sign up for, whether it be Christmas Eve or Wednesday night, So
right.
So it's all the same. So
I've had this conversation with a couple veterinarians. It makes sense. Obviously, I want there to be equine vets, and I want there to be large animal vets in general, because I deal with large animals on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But let's take the scenario of you are an aspiring vet student. You're a 22-year-old male or female, and you have a passion for horses. And so you say, okay, well, I want to be an equine vet then. Well, part of that is, what do you have a passion for being around horses all day, or do you like to ride your horse that's at the barn, right? Because if that's the case, well, then you could be a small animal vet, work at a small animal clinic, have 9 to 5 hours, have, X amount of PTO, and have like kind of the standard office job. And then you have all this time to spend with your horse that you like versus maybe, and I don't think everyone's like that. I think there are people out there that are like, no, I like being around horses. I like working on horses, and every day that's what I want to do. I don't want to be in the small animal clinic trying to like trim Fluffy's nails or whatever you got to do in the small animal clinic.
Yeah.
But that, it's almost hard for large animal to be competitive if that is what the person wants, is the like, they want that kind of 9 to 5 office job once they leave vet school. That's my opinion anyway. And that's what, and you might be more aware of that since you're actually in the industry, but I feel like that is what I have seen some people base their decision making on. And then there's other people who are like, no, I just want to be like out on a farm. I want to be driving around in a truck. I want to be boots on the ground. And like you said, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't get to, if I'm in one of those rural areas, I don't get to like ride my horses all the time, but I get to be doing what I actually want to do.
What you actually want to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it's certainly, and I think these days, just veterinary medicine in general, both small and large animal, I think there's a little bit more control with the small animal, of making it more of a 9 to 5. But I know, from, just watching and seeing my husband, it might be 9 to 5, but boy, they bang out a 9 to 5 day. I mean, it is, it's
right. I'm not saying small animal vets don't work hard.
Right.
I'm just saying that.
Yeah. But again, there's a little bit more control as far as the lifestyle, and you can pick and choose your path a little bit more. But with equine, it's almost like you kind of have to do your time, and it's blood, sweat, and tears, and it's that sort of old paradigm, that in that mentality that you don't have to be James Harriet, that's at it all hours of the day. But unfortunately, that is still, that's still part of it, because again, there just not enough veterinarians to go around to do the work. And again, because it's more rural, it's more spread out, it takes a bit, takes time to get places. And I have often contemplated, what is the solution for today's young practitioner who, wants to make a decent living, wants to have a decent lifestyle, still wants to pursue their passion in equine medicine. It is shifting. It's starting to shift, and the industry is starting to do something about it, but not before it's almost become a crisis situation. I think when those things do shift, when salaries increase for these guys, because again, it used to be that we were so hungry to do equine medicine, you'd be like, well, just pay my bills and I'll just keep working, and then 5 or 6 years, if I'm good enough, you can pay me a salary, and and all that kind of stuff. Wanted it that bad to be out there and doing the work, but it's different now for lots of different reasons. But I think the industry is definitely shifting. When you're reading, when you're reading magazine articles, there's always something about, mental health and well-being of practitioners, and what can we do to bring practitioners into, what resources are there to bring the vet students into, into the industry and try to keep them there and retain them. But I think there has to be a big shift in order to keep people to keep people going. And then, the other thing is I think specialty practice is, it is one of the, maybe one of the pitfalls, because I think everybody wants to be a specialist, and then the specialists get, they kind of get saturated to where they can't take on any more clients because they have so many clients. So then you've got a veterinarian who's learned everything, but now is a specialist and gets paid pretty lucratively to be that specialist. But then there's only so much that specialist can do in a day or a week or whatever. So it takes another just general practitioner out of the pot. So we have a lot of equine veterinary dentists around. And so, we try to support them because they're doing dentistry and they're doing it sort of a little bit beyond a level that a general practitioner will do. So the standard is higher, but then they can only do so much. And so you try to keep referring horses that need to go to these specialists, but they're not taking any more clients. So then, then that horse misses out on maybe a procedure that can be done. So I think there's, even though specialty practice is great, if there's somebody who has a special craft to do, and again, that's kind of where I've sort of put myself, there's still nobody out there to do the work, just the general day-to-day work, the lacerations, the colics, the vaccines, the Coggins, the medical workups, all those sorts of things. So I think specialty practice is kind of been a little bit of a pitfall for general practice, for that reason. So yeah, and it was hard for me to take that step out of general practice in order to do the specialty practice that I'm doing right now. So yeah. So.
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if this will make any sense, but I'd like to know your thoughts about this. You know how, like, if you hang around anybody that really loves what they do, they'll eventually crack a joke, something like, "Oh, I need somebody to do the books for me because I'm terrible at charging enough, or I'm terrible at billing." Do you think that's part of the problem with a lot of things in not just the equine industry, but a lot of things in the equine industry, where you have a lot of practitioners who really love what they do, but maybe they don't I don't know. It's like, and you see it in horse training on a lower level. It's not as professional, and there's not as much, most people don't even go to school. It's not like you go to horse training school, but even pretty experienced trainers will still have a pretty hard time setting a right. competent price and billing and being on time and and kicking people out of the program that don't pay. And maybe that is happening farther up the line too, where, I'm sure the vet practice doesn't have a hard time billing, but when you're talking about the guy who's in the field doing the work, really loves what he does, might have a hard time really requiring, the right amount of pay. You see that in carpentry even sometimes, certain guys who just love carpentry and do odd jobs and have a small business, and then they don't charge enough, and they're not they're not mean enough in a way. You don't need to be mean, but in a way you have to be that other guy. If you're going to run your own small business, then you have to be the bookkeeper, you better get one, and you got to be the biller, or you better get one. But you can't just be Mr. Nice Guy. And on top of that, you love what you do and you're going above and beyond. So you are getting lots of work. Like you are doing great as far as work, but you might not be doing as well as as well in terms of driving the economy of your profession.
Yeah. No, so, that's a big part of it. Both, I think, again, across the board, any craftsman, but, I think of farriers and, some of the guys around here, they try to, keep the work going. And again, to make it affordable for the general person, but then also try to make a living, and and these guys are across the scale as far as what they charge. But, if you're going to be bending over dealing with people's horses every day, it should be multiple times a day. I don't even care if you're trimming. You shouldn't be a craft like that if you're really, really good at it. Same thing. You've got to charge what you're worth. And I think, any of us and you guys as well, the work you put into a horse, it's not just the work that you're being paid for, but again, it becomes part of you. We're talking about the love of your craft. And when you're, not only are you practicing a craft, but you're providing a service for somebody. So you've got to charge for that service, but because you love that and, you kind of take it on as, I love what I do, so maybe I won't charge that much because I'm having fun doing it. And then you get into this, dilemma where you have so much work, you're kind of working yourself a little crazy and thinking, well, I could be working less and charging more. But then you have that dilemma of like, how can you raise your prices to still feel like what you're doing is of value, both for the client? Because again, if you raise your prices, you'll lose a customer, because not everybody can afford things, these sort of luxury ticketed, I think, my practice that I have now, it's a little luxurious. It's, a mixture of chiropractic and massage therapy and acupuncture and, some integrative medicine. And, that should be really expensive considering all the training that goes behind it. But, I've got to make it to where it's affordable for every horse to have it. They're not picking and choosing, because I think it does help. And again, this article that I read earlier, they were talking about the cost of medicines. Pharmaceutical costs are driving the cost of keeping horses up. And again, is that going to drive the cost of caring for the horses out? So then it puts the horses in jeopardy, because an owner might have a horse but not be able to afford its basic vaccines or afford to have the vet out to do the vaccines. And so I think it goes full circle. There's so many little dilemmas that go around it. And when you're practicing a craft because you love the craft, not because you're out there to make money because you're a veterinarian, it does factor into that. Are you charging enough for what you're doing? And of course, one of the big dilemmas I had before I left the practice, they had just been taken over by corporate, and on multiple levels, our prices kept going up. So our professional services were increasing, and the cost of medicine was increasing, and the cost of procedures was increasing, and probably increasing to the point where, yes, we were being paid for what we're worth. But then the dilemma was like, we may not be able to ever do any of these procedures, because when you quote somebody something for a procedure, they're like, oh, I really can't afford that for so-and-so. And sometimes that's a life or death, decision about a horse. And so it's a dilemma on many levels, both professionally and, your passion for the practice that you're doing, and your passion for the animal, your compassion for the animal, because you want to do the best and you don't want to put a price tag on what is best for the animal. So yeah, it does make it difficult, because some of our animals are commodities, they're racehorses, and some of our animals are, family pets that have been around for 25 years, so yeah, it's on a lot of different levels. So, but over the years, you learn to just kind of, make those decisions with, the best, the best tools that you have in your toolkit. So a lot of it is just, experience, or knowing the client, or knowing the horse, or knowing the situation, and, all those different things. There's so many different things that factor into it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah, no, that's really great to hear from you, because I grew up, not necessarily working with horses, but in an environment where my dad worked for himself, and it was always something new every day, and you were in control of billing people, and in a way, like, it's easy to, I don't know, it's easy to have the mentality that you can just do things a little cheaper and be nice to people, and you enjoy what you do, but you also can forget you're in control now of your own happiness. So if you do love what you do and you do want to, offer that great product to your customer, you're not going to do that for very long if you're not happy yourself.
agree
And I
doing it.
remember it was always tossed around that, if you're angry while you're working, you probably didn't charge enough. And that balance, that, yeah, it's good to love what you do. It's good to be very fair and offer the best product to your customer, but you also have to offer the best product to yourself. And then if you have a family, now you add it on to that. And if you have,
Right.
have employees, now you have to take care of them. So that does go with that you have to make sure that you're charging enough, and kind of bolstering the small economy of your life. It just gets bigger and bigger. There's you, and then there's you and maybe your family, and then you and your employees, and then you and your customers, and kind of starts with you and grows out from there. Could you talk a little bit, though, like in terms of what we've been talking about so far? You've mentioned already in the podcast, and I remember we talked about it some when you were here, just the change that has been going on with veterinary practices, and corporate companies buying up smaller practices, and obviously in your case, sounds like it kind of led to you leaving that particular practice. Could you talk a little bit about when you first noticed that change starting to happen, and what are some of the things that it's been affecting besides what we've already been talking about?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing was the biggest thing was just it just kind of felt like it lost its cohesiveness and the tangibility of the practice. So working here for 20 years, there was the small group of us, the 6.5 of us that knew the community very well, knew how the community worked. If you knew, there were just so many intricacies that sort of went into the practice. We had 3 girls that worked in the office, and it's a small community where we live, so everybody kind of knows everybody that was things that are going on, and the racers would come into town and things would get busy, but it just kind of was as a very cohesive group. And if somebody needed something, you just, you rolled right out and you did what you needed to do. And as the corporate came in and they sent people in to the office to sort of change how we worked, it was like, well, that may not work so well with so-and-so because this particular client, you treat a different way because they have been treated that way for so long. And all of a sudden you kind of shut the doors on them for some reason other than, or for no reason other than it being a new corporate policy. And I just kind of felt like there wasn't any cohesiveness between the people who were making the new policies and how we dealt with our clients. And it just kind of got more and more separate, and it got more timely. And, you were kind of measured on a number versus the work you did. And I just, felt like things were getting a little bit devalued as far as the work. And just the way that I wanted to continue doing my work, and not in it being again more of a practice and a craft rather than a volume of drugs that I sold, or a number that I brought in every day. And it just again, it just kind of became something that I didn't have a good. I just wasn't bringing it, again, was sort of bringing more anger into my work because people were changing the way that I wanted to work. And so I ended up being a little bit more angry about, doing the work that I was doing every day. and didn't like what I was bringing to my clients and my patients. So it was time to change it. And I think that that's one of the things that I worry about with the newer generation of veterinarians is that, can we continue the craft and the practice and the feel and developing relationships with clients rather than just, them being just another patient that they're seeing that day. And again, I think, maybe it'll change if they, allow telemedicine a little bit. Maybe that'll allow a little bit more tangibility between, clients and patients. Maybe, if there's more veterinarians, we can bring back more educational things for clients, and have people sort of be together a little bit more, if that makes sense. I think I kind of lost my train of thought. Just bringing, again, just making a little bit more tangible, and not worrying about paying corporate people, but just investing more in the clients and the patients more than anything. So, yeah, for what that's worth. So,
no, I can 100% appreciate where you're coming from on that, because there's obviously more to it than the classic trope of, well, corporates come in and turned us all into sellouts, and so I'm getting the heck out of Dodge, which I can appreciate that narrative. It kind of impacted me in a past life, but like you said, it just changes. It can, if you get into something like this, because you have that love and you have that passion, there's only so much they can alter how you pursue that before it kind of detracts from the sense of fulfillment you get, I would imagine.
Yeah. That's and again, it detracts from what you can give back to your patient, and your fulfillment that you've done a good job for the day, and you've done some good work. And that's where I started, got my certifications in chiropractic and massage therapy 13 or 14 years ago, and I never expected that to sort of take over my general practice, but it became a little bit of a different avenue in where I could do something a little bit more for the horse than just providing. It's something that was cumulative for the horse, rather than you do it and then you wait and see what happens. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, well, then what do you do? But I find that this work is cumulative, and a lot of the patients that I see, now I've been working on for a while, and they, again, with it being cumulative, it just seems like what you put in there stays in there, and the more you do at the beginning, the less you have to do as it goes on, and you're not relying on, not that there's not a place for it, and not that I, in the past have practiced integrating regular medicine in with the alternative therapies, because I think those modalities will complement each other really well. But it is something that I feel like I can continuously do and give to the horse, and feel good about giving to it, and then know that I'm making a difference. And we haven't had to spend a lot of money, do a lot of diagnostics, and we get a result, and maybe little results will add to a bigger one, or a big result, and then we can maintain it. But it feels like where I am at my practice, it's just good to be able to to give, and I get a little bit back from them, and then the clients seem happy, and again, the connections with the horses are really good. But I feel like it's a craft that I seem to morph, and it perfects. I get better at it all the time. The horses make me better at it, and I think that's what's satisfying me where I am in my practice now. Whereas before it was a little repetitive, it was a little mundane. And then of course, there was a lot of pressure to, be able to perform and bring in the money for the practice. And it just got a little bit sticky. So,
Sure.
But yeah, and then just being able to just to expand on it and to take it different levels, and what I plan on doing in a year is hoping to just have a little bit of a different platform to offer, with integrating different things. There's so many there's so many different modalities as far as being able to offer for the horses now, performance wise, and just being able to do a little bit more for them than just using medication. That's kind of where I want to take the practice a little bit more. So,
So another question I had for you, and I'd be curious to get your take on it, especially given how you've shifted in your career. I know there's local vets around here, where, it might be a standard thing, like you come see a horse, you fix the problem, and then you prescribe something to fix the problem. And it might be even a case of, keeping the horse on something long term, or at least, for a couple months or whatever the deal might be. And I know people who, like, for example, my fiance, she works for a company that's like a supply company, but they're also an online pharmacy. And so through her job, she can get kind of more competitive pricing on a lot of drugs because she works for the pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, hey, like, can I get the script? And then I can get this script for my horse, and then we can put them on whatever they need. Well, there are some vets or vet practices that are like, no, we're not doing that. And when you kind of press, and it's like, well, why are you not doing that? It's like, well, because we need you to go through our pharmacy so we can hit our quota.
Yeah,
is
right.
Like what it comes down to. Now, there are some good arguments where I know there are cases where people, try to buy a drug from a non-reputable place on the internet, right? And then it's like, well, you kind of, if you're going to roll the dice there, you need to do your research, and you need to know who you're buying from. And so that's what they'll tell you a lot of times. And I can appreciate that. Like, if you prescribe something to an animal, you want to make sure that's what the animal's actually getting.
Right.
But it's also hard when, and I know that's like kind of a unique scenario, but the bottom line is part of their revenue comes down to prescribing the drug and then making sure that you buy the drug through them, which is a little bit of a scary proposition, because it doesn't take someone with all that much intelligence to figure out there's a lot of kind of room for corruption in that. So I'd be curious to hear your take on it, because you mentioned a drug quota in your previous situation.
Yeah. So, again, and part of it was one of the things that I noticed when I was in practice is that there were continued markups. And again, when our practice was sold, there was a fair markup, because we had been, making, I guess, the reasonable profit or the regular profit off the sales of medications and things like that. And that's part of the veterinary business, but it just seemed like they continue to increase the cost of these medications without no real, or I guess just, not explaining to us, why the cost of medications was going up, or we'd have, a client would get a bill at the end of the month and say, I didn't realize it was going to be that much, or, you'd prescribe something, you'd go to bill it, and you're like, oh man, shoot, they're going to like freak out when they see the amount of money this was. And, there were several times where I'd be messaging clients going, I know I dispensed this to you today. I will be able to write a prescription for you somewhere else. So there is, and again, with me being in this new avenue of practice that I'm in, I have the potential to start my own online pharmacy in a few months, which, exploring that avenue, so that when I can prescribe again, there's no middleman. And I think that's how some of these pharmacies are setting up, or some of the, not necessarily pharmacies, but the distributor companies are setting up for some practices now. But it's all based on volume. And so I think these bigger practices buy bigger volumes of things so they can get the volume of drugs a little bit cheaper. But obviously they still have to pay for them. So there's still a fair markup. Whereas I think these distributors serving solo practitioners or small practitioners, nowadays it seems like instead of a practitioner buying a bunch of stock and keeping inventory, you just you're not the middleman anymore. So you make you prescribe, and then the client will order directly off of your online pharmacy that is through a reputable distributor company. And that seems to be what I understand, how I understand it works now. But I don't understand from a corporate point of view why the previous practice I worked with, why their costs of drugs were going up so substantially. And there just never seemed to be a reason for it. And it would change month to month or every couple of months. And, you prescribe something one month and then go back and prescribe it again. And the cost was almost double. And, well, that's just how it is now. And so, but then when you look at, the corporate website and you see all the people that the corporation is paying to work for them, it's like, okay, now I understand why, but we've forgotten about, we've forgotten about the little backyard client that, can barely afford a bottle of Butte, because they've got other things. So I just kind of felt like there was a big disconnect between our patients and the rest of the company. And that's why I didn't like, and again, just, and never really being able to get answers, for questions like that. Why have we had a 90% markup on a drug since, 3 months ago? So yeah, and I don't fully understand how that industry flows, but, knowing what I know now, setting up with starting to set up, for my online pharmacy to go live with it in a few months, the prices are going to be reasonable, and I don't have to deal with any of that. I just write the prescription and whatever. And again, the other part of it is which states, regulations and requirements, you've got to have a relationship with that patient and the client in order to prescribe. And so there are scenarios where, you may not be taking care of the animal, but you might be friends with a client, and, they say, hey, can I get this a little bit cheaper from you? Well, legally, no, you can't. If you don't have a client in a veterinary, you don't have a client relationship established. So there are some legal repercussions to it as far as your state licensing and everything. So yeah. But again, I think that's another big part of the industry, medications and pharmaceuticals, being prohibitively costly for these clients. But having said that, you look at the nutraceutical industry, supplements and things like that, and I have walked into tack rooms and feed rooms and barns before, and I look at all the stuff that they have. They have the feed, and then they have the 75 other things that go in the feed to make the horses do different things.
I could see Camden being ground zero for that type of tack room. Yep, I could understand that.
Yeah, and then they have a sticker shock and a vaccine, and you're like, well, it needs the vaccine, but it doesn't need the jump higher and the go faster and the look shinier, supplements. But yeah, so and that's a whole other can of worms. Is there's so many things out there that claim to do so many things for these horses, and how do you decipher all that information and read about all of it and still be able to make the best recommendations for your clients, both from a nutraceutical or supplemental standpoint and pharmaceutical. So yeah. So again, a whole other can of worms to talk about. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you didn't fully understand that industry and why the markups are happening. And I don't mean to put my tinfoil hat on, but I think with whether it's animal or human pharmaceuticals, I think it might be in some people's best interests if the general public didn't understand that industry, because then you can do things like have 90% markups, and as long as no one's looking, behind the curtain, then that just is the reality of it. And and again, I'm not pretending to know, pretending to think I know everything about that, but again, just my understanding of the system, and again, with the big corporations and the lots of mouths to feed back at the office, and kind of the dynamic of that whole deal, I could see where there's lots of room for there to be fat built up in the system, basically.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That puts me in mind of that new law that was enacted back in June for OTC animal antibiotics that used to be able to, go buy at Tractor Supply, and now you need a prescription from your veterinarian. I don't know. Has that affected veterinarians at all? I feel like for us, I mean, I'm with Joe. I'd put on my tinfoil hat and say that's control and just another way to siphon a few more dollars and just have control over people.
Yeah, I could see in some ways how it could be. The other thing is, I've run into scenarios where, you get called out to see something, and, you go say it's a, horse that's had a cough, and, or not even a cough, might be lame, and, they end up giving it an antibiotic from Tractor. Well, we had this on the shelf. We got it at Tractor Supply, last year, and you're kind of like scratching your head, and you're looking at the bottle of whatever that's sitting on the shelf is kind of dusty and dirty and probably should have been refrigerated, and they've given it intramuscularly instead of, intravenously, and maybe it needs to go one way and not another, and maybe it's not even the right drug for, what they're using. So I feel like as far as antibiotic use, probably better that it's over the counter, or maybe should come with a client education sheet or something like that. Or again, I feel like if it's even if they're selling it at Tractor Supply, if it comes with a prescription, at least there's been some interaction between the veterinarian and the client. right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not just going to buy it off the shelf to give it for something random, because there are specific antibiotics for specific things. And so I feel like, yeah, maybe a little bit of regulation from that point of view is a good idea. You know, and I have walked down the aisles of Tractor Supply before and go, you know, kind of like, you know, look and say, well, why is the noracillin just out on the shelf? Like, shouldn't that be like protected, or at least, you know, where some in the right hands? And sometimes these drugs in the wrong hands things can go wrong, or, you know, can provide, you know, a bad situation if it's, you know, if it's not used in the right context. So I think as far as, you know, things like that, there probably should be, you know, some degree of regulation, and maybe the availability at places like Tractor Supply make it better. You know, if there's not a veterinarian available to actually administer the medication, at least there might be some, if there's a regulation on it, they need a prescription, at least there's an interaction between the client and the veterinarian to say, go pick up this from Tractor Supply, you give 10 cc's of this, you give it in the muscle, you know, whatever. So at least there's some sort of, you know, interaction between the veterinarian and the patient, or the client. But yeah, I think in all types of industries, there's, you know, again, control, regulation, you know, allowances, who's going to make the dollar off of it, or whatever. So yeah, so I think there's probably some room for a little bit more regulation than not. So with things like that, yeah.
Hey there, On the Move listener. Do you enjoy listening to this podcast? If you've made it this far in the episode, I assume you do. But you never know. I could just be talking to someone's house cat at this point. But if you are there and you like the podcast, the best thing you can do to help support our journey to keep this thing going is to find us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, leave a rating, leave a review, get on social media, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube. The more we can grow this, the easier it's going to become for us to put out episodes every week and get awesome guests so we can learn and stay on the move just like you. Thanks.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny you said it should come with an information sheet. It kind of does. Most of those bottles, you know, you peel back the sticker and then there's that sheet that's like 3 feet long and an inch
yeah.
wide. But like, who reads that?
Who reads
I
it,
wouldn't
right?
read that. I mean, and especially if it's a drug you're going to sell over the counter to farmers. So like there's a advertising and business guru, and he always says, you know, I think most Americans don't read over the 4th grade reading level. So if you're doing ads and stuff, you know, keep it simple, keep it really clear. You don't need to wow people, just getting the message across. Like that might be something to think about if you're selling drugs. Now, maybe with the prescription thing, that could be part of it. Maybe there is good people in there saying, hey, we need to be more ethical about who's getting these drugs and how they're administered and make sure the animals have the right care. But if you were going to sell drugs, they also might want to think about relabeling some stuff, because especially now, like we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, whether it's good or bad, people are getting used to, you know, receiving content in new ways. You know, they're not reading as much, they're listening to podcasts. Same with reading stuff. You know, if you get a bottle and it's got an inch wide by 3 foot long pull out info, you know, little pamphlet, that might not be the best way to tell people how to administer the drug. Maybe you need a QR code that goes to some instructional video, or maybe just say less and have the clear, you know, print on there. And then if you need a bunch of legal fine print, put it down at the bottom. But
put it at the bottom.
There's so much fine print, and there's so much, you know, and it may not be the case, but it often feels like they kind of want you to find it so frustrating that you find somebody else to do it for you. And you just leave it up to the professionals. Like, just tell me what I need and I'll give it to the cow. And then at the end of the day, like, I mean, we don't have an actual regenerative ranch by any stretch of the imagination. We're a nice little ranch, but we're not, you know, out there spreading manure and having chickens and rotating stuff around. But, you know, we've had this talk before, similar kind of thing where we're giving medicine and we're like, well, what are we supposed to give again? What the heck? And how do you do this? And then we kind of go, why are we even giving this to them anyway? Like sometimes there's certain things we're doing exactly what you said. We're like coming across a sick cow and going, let's give them the blah, 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 So
Right.
when you encounter, 10 sick animals over the course of a month or two, and you give them one of two different doses of two different medicines, it's like, well, are you sure that the 10 different sicknesses that you encountered are all covered under those two different medicines? Maybe it is a wonder drug. Maybe it's the best stuff on earth. But rarely in life is anything that awesome that you can have 10 different sicknesses, and the perfect cure is either one dose of this or one dose of that. Or if the first dose of one thing didn't work, wait 3 days and give them a dose of the other thing. And you're like, I'm a good rancher. And when you really think about it, you feel kind of dumb. You're like, we're probably just buying this stuff and giving it to them. And again, there's a little tinfoil hat mixed in there, but I would like more information. I would like a more holistic approach. I would like to know what the medicine does, what you really should give, and then some preventative stuff. Like we've talked about already, how, you can just keep buying the pain medicine, or you can try to go, ahead of the disease and start heading it off and looking preemptively for the problems. I don't know. Frank, it's weird. I work with animals, but I feel like I know even a little bit more about human medicine just hanging around Dr. Bill here. And I like to read stuff about that, but we certainly do that in mainstream medicine with humans, right? We're so much more focused on, having Band-Aids than actually preventing a lot of diseases through lifestyle. Yeah. And in some cases it takes, medication, medicine, therapy, things like that. But it all starts with lifestyle, but it's just not harped on enough about, and probably very similar with horses as well. So do you find that along with like chiropractic for horses, what are some of the other things that you've leaned into outside of the traditional medicine that is practiced by veterinarians that I don't know, like you said with chiropractic, it's not always the biggest difference that you see in the end, but you do see a difference. So you're like, oh, wow, this could be a compounding effect that in the end leads to something I can see in the horse, and I feel like I offered him something. Are there other things that you do where you feel that same feeling?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I went to, when I did my chiropractic training, one of the things we had to do for the final exam was sort of come up with a way of selling, how does chiropractic fit into your practice, into your daily practice? And so I was thinking about it, and in so many scenarios that I've come across over the years is that, in vet school, they teach you what things look like when they're normal. So like you learn anatomy and physiology and all that. They teach you the normal. Then they teach you to recognize what things look like when they're broken. And then they teach you how to fix it. But there was never any sort of how do you maintain normal? So that's where my chiropractic practice came in, is like, it really should help maintain normal because of how it works. It's, we use bones in order to manipulate the nervous system, and the nervous system sort of controls the whole body. So if you're able to affect the nervous system, then your body's running the right way. It's running on full tilt. So what I would get with my chiropractic cases is people would say, well, we did this and we did that, and we had it injected, and we gave it this and we gave it that, and none of that worked, so we thought we'd call you. And so they would, present me with this horse that had all this stuff done to it already. And so you'd have to take this, this horse that's, already had all the things done. And you're like, well, you've got nothing else to work with but your hands and sort of what you go with on the field. And then you just sort of start working, you make your adjustments, and some of them get better quickly. Some of them get better a little slowly. Some of them don't get better. Some of them get better, but you've got to do a few more things, or sometimes you find something else that was the cause of all the stuff that went wrong. So, but yeah, I think that some, again, the other modalities I use acupuncture, and that is I've probably been practicing for about 8 or 9 years with acupuncture, and I still feel a little Harry Potter with it, with the kid who had the wand that didn't work. It's such a powerful modality that I strive to continue to become more fluent with it. And, again, it's a practice, it's a feel. And every case I do, I learn something different. So, always wish my results were better. But I think that over time, they will be. And I love doing the massage therapy because, again, I think it just kind of connects me with the horse a little differently, and I can just kind of tune in a little bit more to what they need, based on what I'm feeling. And I think that there's a lot of these other modalities, the pulse and the magnets and all those different things that are helpful. But I think when you integrate everything, it really does pull it all together. And I think the integrative part is probably what's sort of driven me to do this, to have all these different tools in the toolbox to pull out and use. So yeah. So I don't know how you guys, how often you see a vet for anything, any dilemmas or any horses that come to you for work, and, you kind of say, hey, wait a second, maybe this isn't a training problem. It could be a vet problem, or I get presented with vet problems that sometimes I feel are training problems,
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah. I know for me personally, I try not to, because like there's a big trope in, if you're, especially in kind of like this horsemanship, I feel like there's a big trope of, oh, well, this horse has this problem because, he's like, something's out of place there, and and he's got ulcers from this and da da da. And, there are times where it's like, well, no, like that horse just needs things shaped up and kind of learn how to like act with a little discipline for the first time in his life.
Yeah.
And all this like twitchiness will go away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are things where, you work with them, and like, for me, I don't think it's necessarily every horse. And I do think a lot of times they are, man-made. So like if you're talking about colts, it's less likely, but like ulcers, given a horse's history, like ulcers are a big deal. And I've seen, treating for stuff like that have huge benefits to the training. 'Cause it's like, well, yeah, now they finally feel good. So of course they can like pay attention in class better.
Right.
Right. And, I haven't done a lot with it. I have had, I have been in places where, or like, for example, I've like boarded at a barn before where there was a chiropractor that came to the barn. And so I was like, okay, well, yeah, I haven't seen that, like sign me up, da, da, da. And then I've actually now, had people that are interested in, they wanted, they were doing some sort of certification, and it wasn't, I think it was the Masterson method.
Masterson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So someone was doing a certification for that. And I kind of knew her through the Buck Brannaman horsemanship clinics and stuff like that. So she was like, I'm looking for horses to work on, and I know you have a lot of horses. Do you think your horses or any of your client horses, like, would there be clients that would let me work on their horses for free, basically? And there were a couple people that were like, yeah, let's do that. And I can't speak to the effectiveness of that, because I do think one thing that's tough, and you might agree with this, like at least for me, when a horse is in constant work, like for example, I'm getting paid to work with them on a daily basis.
Mm.
And I have seen what just good quality riding can do for a horse in terms of their muscle and how they carry themselves and their disposition.
Mm.
Well, if you're doing all that plus this other stuff, you know, it might be helping, but the problem is it's not like there's a control, right?
Right. Right.
It's like, well, okay, well, is it variable A or variable B? Because they
Mm-hmm.
both change weekly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So is
Mm-hmm.
it like, you know, is this helping 50% and that's helping 50%, or are you just completely piggybacking off this, or vice versa, you know? And so that's kind of where I wouldn't consider myself someone who's like, oh, that's a bunch of junk, but I haven't been in a setting where at least the body work for the horses I've been working with, which are like, I mean, horses that maybe have behavioral issues and they need to go and just like be a solid citizen, which is way different than like a performance horse situation or
Mm-hmm.
something that is what I would consider having a lot of like physical demands placed on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have firsthand experience, but I know a lot of people in performance horse situations that swear by it. And it makes a lot of sense to me, because I don't know how it would be any different from a human athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as far as like, I don't know, the, you know, just kind of the cranky backyard horse, it's just, for me at least, it's like, I don't have answers. I just have solutions. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going to tell you I know 100% what was causing the issue, but I got like 5 things we can try, and one of them's probably going to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
that's my take on it anyway.
one of my, maybe one day I'll get brave enough to ask this question when I go to a buck, like, because there's so many things that he does and so many things that, you know, he's so intuitive about. But I've always wondered, like, how do you keep your horses? How does he keep his horses sound? And I know it's like you were saying, you know, there's no substitution for just clarity and good work for these horses, you know, and they know their part and they have got a partnership. But I always wonder, and we were at a clinic a few years ago with him. It was a cattle working clinic. We were watching the horsemanship side, and he was on a young horse. And he made a comment about his horse was feeling a little sticky on one side that day. And he said, I'm just going to, you know, make sure I do a little bit more work this side this day. And, you know, we'll see he's like tomorrow. And he actually revisited that the next day, remembered to revisit it the next day. And he was like, you know, horse feels great on this side, but now he's feeling a little sticky on the other side. And, you know, again, so many scenarios that I get presented with, you know, oh, you know, his shoulder bulges to the left, or his shoulder bulges to the right, or he swaps leads, or he won't go forward, or he'll slam on the brakes, or whatever. So then as a veterinarian, I have to try to decipher, is this a, you know, is this a real pain problem, or is this, you know, a training issue? And I'm lucky that I have so many resources here in Camden and so many good friends who practice good horsemanship and have led me down the horsemanship path, so I can look at things from a horseman's point of view to help me decipher whether some of these issues are really pain, or are they really, you know, are they just behavior? And, you know, so that's an interesting thing. I, you know, always sort of wonder, like, again, some of your other guests that you've had, like, I've loved, like, you guys talking to Sarah and Ricky Quinn, because they've so many interesting perspectives from from a veterinarian's point of view, I'm like, I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that makes total sense. And then just listening to somebody like Nick Dowers, like how does he, where's the vet fall into his program, and how does he use his veterinarian? I think he made a comment about his performance horse vet is like 6 hours away. So like they'll take a trailer load through. And I worked for a professional rider several years ago, and I would go on and off his farm a little bit during the summer. And it was very interesting to see how his whole operation worked. And he would have, a group of horses that were going to the vet, and, he'd load the trailer down and go to the vet and come back with that group of horses and take another group of horses. And then, another group was doing this one day. But it was really interesting to see how everything sort of fit. And these were Olympic level horses. And so it's like, you sort of wonder what goes on behind the scenes to get these guys where they're going. And who, what are everybody's tricks of the trade to get their horses going and doing the things that they do on the levels that they do them. And again, that has always been one of my questions for Buck is like, does he actually use a lot of, does he inject all his horses before they go on the road, or, does he use anequin regularly, or does he just ride them that damn good and they're that good and that sound for that long, and I feel like I know the answer to that. He probably doesn't use a vet a whole lot because there's so many things that I think you can do from good riding to make a horse feel good. So,
I mean, the way I view, at least what I feel like I can do for a horse with the training side of it, if you were going to use a human comparison, it's like, okay, well, how do you stay so healthy? How do you, not have aches and pains when you wake up and things like that? And the answer from what I can provide would be like, well, I'm fit and I can move around and do all these things because I get up in the morning and practice yoga for 30 minutes or, whatever sort of physical habit you've created for yourself to take care of your body in that way. And so if you did that every day and then also had a really good diet, that would be a good thing, right? But at least my personal opinion is you have to, close to every day, do something to kind of maintain your physical balance and range of motion and things like that. And that's to me what like proper riding can do for a horse would be like a daily yoga practice or like a daily, gym routine or something like that, where you're maintaining all that stuff and reinforcing that balance, and you just kind of keep everything tuned up, right? But then that's not to say, obviously, like I still go to the doctor and I still try to eat healthy, and I start like if I needed to get body work done because I was that kind of athlete, I would. So like you can add all those things into the mix, but at the base of it would still be like I said, if you're gonna be healthy, like running, for example, if you're gonna be an Olympic track star, you got to get up and run every day. If you want to be healthy, one of the things you could do is get up and run it every day, just like at a base level. And, to get to the Olympic level, you might have to stack a whole lot of other things on top of that habit. But the base habit has to be, well, I do the right thing for my body in terms of how I use it every day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my perspective on what quality horsemanship and quality riding can do. And then you go however many levels high you need to go to get whatever job you're trying to accomplish done with your horse.
Yeah. So
amen to that. Hey guys, we probably better wrap this thing up. We're about a little over 90 minutes. But that's a really good place to end it. I think we've sort of covered all the bases, and Nicole, thanks so much for doing this. It's been a lot of fun. We
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
have to circle back
It's
down
been
the
a
road.
great conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Did you have a good Christmas?
We did. Yes. Yes.
That's
Thank you.
good.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I hope you guys did too. So, well, we were talking
we did.
earlier, just a few indulgences as you normally do at Christmas, but yeah, it was good. So, but yeah, you guys keep posted on any clinics coming up. Love to see you guys again. So,
Sure thing.
Absolutely. Likewise.
yeah.
Well,
All right. We'll hang in
stay
there
on
when
the line, but we're going to end the recording.
You bet.
Okay.